additional water from Cedar Creek. By the time that's complete, we'll have the wetland at Cedar Creek and have an additional 30% of yield out of Cedar Creek as well. What previously yielded 175,000 acre feet at Cedar Creek will now yield 223,000 acre feet, an additional 30%. The wetland facility is a small footprint. It's on there. Both wetland facilities will be 2,000 acres, much smaller than a reservoir footprint. And those wetlands are capable of removing from the river water, I'd say 65% of the nitrogen and phosphorus, which acts as a fertilizer almost. If you put it, well, it is fertilizer. If you put it into a reservoir with high nutrients in it, it can sometimes cause algae blooms and degrade the quality of the water in the reservoir. So the wetlands polish that water, remove nitrogen, phosphorus, solids, and the water that's lifted back into the lake for storage, for reuse, is of a higher quality than the water that's native to the reservoir. So it's actually cleaner water. You'll see where we discharge the wetland water back into the reservoir will be a plume where it's just much cleaner water. And the crappie fishermen love it because the sand bass and the crappie tend to hang out where this massive amount of wetland water is discharged back into Richland Chambers. Just saying. Any fishermen in here? Water conservation is also a very significant part of our planning at Tarrant Regional Water District. Over the last 10 years, the Metroplex water agencies, largely due to a lot of public concern over the water supply strategies that we're pursuing, specifically additional reservoir projects, the opposition often touts that the Metroplex is wasting water. So we've got that reputation, if you will, to deal with. And what has happened over the last 10 years is a massive commitment and a massive public response to water conservation. What has happened is the cities have restricted outdoor irrigation. Initially, it was 10 to 6 waterings next in the Metroplex. Dallas started it, then went Arlington, then went all of Tarrant's system, and it was 10 to 6, no outdoor irrigation. We saw a 13% reduction in peak to average ratio of water use throughout the Metroplex as a result of those irrigation restrictions. So what has happened since then? Virtually all of the Metroplex has adopted the outdoor irrigation restrictions, not just during the summer, it's year-round now. It's verboten, if you will, in the Metroplex to irrigate unattended outdoors between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. ever. I mean, you can water it by hand, but not. But as far as turning your sprinkler system on during the day, it is you will hear from your local code enforcement, and it's the results have been staggering. The Metroplex water use in this next version of regional water planning, there is going to be reduced water demand, not reduced population, but reduced water demands applied to regional planning in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex because of the effectiveness of the water conservation that we've experienced. It's not just been the restrictions, it's been public education. If you've been to the Metroplex or still catch Metroplex television, you may have heard the Lawn Whisperer. That was a region-wide advertising approach involving Dallas, Tarrant, North Texas, and it's been, at least there's been polling to indicate that that's been very effective as well. Oh, there he is right there. The Lawn Whisperer. Water conservation and reuse continues to be a major strategy for us. About 24% will be met by conservation offsets. What are we doing additionally? We can't conserve our way to address all of our future water needs. We're continuing to look at water supply reservoirs in the Sulphur River Basin. We have historically, as many of you are aware, have looked at a Marvin Nichols Reservoir project. However, that is not the only alternative that's being evaluated in the Sulphur River Basin. There are several reservoir sites that are being evaluated in addition to Marvin Nichols, as well as modifications to permitting and operations at Wright-Patman, the existing Wright-Patman Lake, and potentially doing that in cooperation with the current users of Wright-Patman, which is the city of Texarkana, and some of the wholesale customers, including International Paper and whatnot. That is still a potential strategy, but there's a whole portfolio of water supply strategies in the Sulphur River Basin that the Sulphur River Basin Authority, Kirby Hollingsworth, is with the board of directors of the SRBA, and he's in the room. Thanks for coming. Probably wanted to make sure I didn't mess up. Hope I didn't. But their board is the local sponsor with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers of the basin-wide environmental studies that are intended to be the studies prerequisite to permitting a large water supply project in the Sulphur River Basin. That study is nearing a critical juncture where potential strategies are going to be identified. Like I said, it could be one, it could be two, it could be Marvin Nichols, it could be Wright-Patman, it could be the Park House Reservoir sites in the far upstream portion of the Sulphur River Basin. Honestly, I don't have a solid understanding on what reservoir project would be recommended. That those studies are being very deliberately proceeded with. Why? Because the federal government reviews every permit application and has to approve basically a net of an environmental impact statement, and actually determines, approves what projects are permittable. And those environmental studies have to be very carefully developed and can hold up reservoir projects for decades. There's two reservoir projects that are being pursued by Metroplex agencies right now in the New Bonham project, as well as the Ralph Hall project by the Upper Trinity Regional Water District. And I cannot tell you how difficult and hopefully not impossible it is to secure these permits for those reservoirs. Those reservoirs are far smaller, with far smaller impacts than any of the potential reservoir sites in the Sulphur River Basin. And those projects are still languishing for formal permits. And these water supply agencies are needing some sort of needing reliability to understand where their supply is going to come from. And that's why it is so difficult and so time-consuming to develop water supply projects. This is a map of the Marvin Nichols Reservoir site, which is the way I describe it on I-30 between Mount Pleasant and Mount Vernon. It's the largest reservoir site in Texas that has not been constructed. It is a 63,000 surface acre reservoir. My largest existing reservoir is 43,000 surface acres, the Richland Chambers Lake. It's the third largest lake in Texas. The Marvin Nichols project is 20,000 surface acres larger than Richland Chambers. It will have a yield of in excess of 600,000 acre feet a year. It's huge. If that reservoir is recommended, we'll see. There's a possibility of several 100,000 acre feet becoming available due to modifications to Wright-Patman, and there's still alternative reservoir sites upstream of Marvin Nichols, the George Parkhouse sites, with a couple 100,000 acre-feet there. We have also looked at bringing water up from Toledo Bend. Nothing's a sure thing. We're watching our other reservoir developers language with their permitting. Maybe we go to Toledo Bend. It's an existing reservoir with 1 million acre-feet of water allocated to Texas, 1 million acre-feet of water allocated to Louisiana, and very little water use from that lake. The problem, it's another 100 miles of pipeline and billions of dollars of additional life cycle costs to move that water from Toledo Bend back to the Metroplex water users. The pipeline projects alone will approach $4 billion. The life cycle cost for paying the electric bill is just breathtaking, to say the least. We've even tried to secure water supply from Oklahoma. We wanted to take water from southeast Oklahoma as well as southwest Oklahoma that was otherwise just flowing unused to the Gulf of Mexico in incredible quantities. There's an interstate compact involving the allocation of that water approved by Arkansas, the legislatures in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Texas, as well as passed by the United States Congress and signed by the President. The interstate compact allocated water, appropriated water equitably among the 4 states, and 24% of that water was allocated to Texas. The problem is when that water hits the Red River, it becomes impaired with chlorides. It's too salty, it requires desalinization, very expensive water treatment. So we had an idea, let's divert the water before it hits the red in Oklahoma. And the Red River Compact set up zones that were irrespective of state boundaries. And we said we want to take the water 2 miles upstream before this water flows into the red. And if we're denied, we find that to be potentially in violation of the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. We applied for permits from Oklahoma to do just that and simultaneously sued them in federal court, saying that if you're going to treat us differently than an Oklahoma applicant for a water right, it's unconstitutional. Well, it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and we lost. And after it was $14 million and 7 years spent trying to litigate that, we argued before the Supreme Court last April, and in June we received a 9-0 unanimous decision against the Metroplex position on trying to secure that water supply. We've been looking everywhere. Our population, one of the things that Walt didn't mention about the Metroplex population is it's projected to double between now and 2050. The numbers that Walt presented were staggering enough. But that population of 5.x million people is anticipated to be 13 million by 2070. We're going to need additional water supply, and the only options is to go where the water is. And there's a lot of water in northeast Texas, and we've been working as politely and diligently as we can to pursue those projects and intend to continue to do so. And as a result, I spend a lot of time in northeast Texas with a lot of nice people. Some people like what I'm doing, some people don't. And we're trying to honestly engage everyone and find the path toward meeting everybody's needs in the most respectful